to talking about research in first aid. And so today, over the next hour or so, I really look forward to learning about what you're doing and hearing some of your ideas in our small groups, which will be happening in a little bit. But also to really think about what we do with first aid and realizing that it's not just we teach community courses, but we use first aid as part of our movement. And first aid is a common denominator between all of our countries and within all of our countries. And we need that in terms of being able to respond to major disasters. And we need it in terms of public health to keep people safe and to help them recover from individual injuries. So just a quick background, I'm a professor of disaster sciences and emergency management at the University of Akron in the United States. And so I've had the pleasure of working with the Global First Aid Reference Center for several years in regards to first aid training and the development of first aid guidelines. And so now I'd like to have Chris introduce herself.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey. Hello, everyone. So lovely to see you all. I'm Chris Bowes. I'm based in the UK, and I've been working with the Global First Aid Reference Centre for several years. I've been with the British Red Cross maybe for 12 years. I was in product development in a research and development team, and more recently I've been writing the first aid guidelines for 2020.
Writing them, yeah, that's impressive.
Well, with working with all these contributors, fantastic contributors had put together.
Your leadership was awesome with that, Chris. We hope that as you're thinking about today, you're really taking in some of these parts that have been built into the international guidelines that were just debuted not too long ago. But there's some great resources in there that are going to leverage research going forward. And you're going to be seeing some things from Chris and her team in regards to some of the gaps that need to be filled, and really great opportunities for you to demonstrate what you're doing in your own country with the rest of the world. So Chris, do you mind if I share my screen with the PowerPoint? All right. I'm going to do this. And then all right, are we good with seeing the title slide?
Yeah, looks good.
Excellent. So as we were designing this idea of a workshop on research, we wanted to make sure that there were some really good connections to our jobs in within the Red Cross, within other organizations. And so there's this idea of quality improvement, which is always in the back of our heads, right? We always want to be better because we want to be of larger service, ultimately to the people who are hurt. But we have to do that through greater service to the people that we're teaching. And so many of us are involved with quality improvement projects, but that is not the same as research. They interact with each other, but they're not necessarily the same. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to create a common language and purpose for what we think of as improvement and what we think of as research. So with that in mind, most of us probably recognize this cycle. I'm not sure which way it goes on your screen, but we assess something and we make some assumptions, and then we make a plan to improve it, and then we actually try the improvement. And with that, there comes another cycle of seeing, did it do its job or not? And then we plan, change differences, and we improve again. I assume we all have experienced that because that's often our job. And our job, I think, allows us to have the basis for what we can contribute as professionals. So many of us have experiences as trainers. Some of us have experience in the field as first aiders. And when we bring that experience in, we can help make those improvements. And so that is of a benefit to our organizations. And so I want you to think about how you've contributed to that process in the past, and think about that as your superpower in order to help with research going forward. Oh, isn't that fun? All right. So the improvement steps, and again, this should be fairly, I'm going to say obvious to most people, but we make an assumption, we have an observation, and we can do this systematically within our field. And we could watch videos, we could have people give us feedback on courses, lots of different ways we can make observations. And then we think about, well, how do we get better at it? So what's the question that we want? And then we have to get a little bit more data on it. So we might have a questionnaire. And then there's some level of analysis that we do within our organization. And for some people, their organization might have to analyze how many people are attending. Are people having a good experience with our training? Our interest might be in, are we making money? So there's lots of different ways to do analysis of quality improvement. And then obviously there should be some level of action that's done to see if we can improve those numbers, those outcomes. And again, we see that as a cycle. What I'd like to do is propose that the research process is similar to that quality improvement process, but it's a little bit more defined. And here's a big difference. Our research goal is ultimately quality improvement, but we're going to reach it in a systematic way. So we're going to do it systematically, like the gears of a machine, so that it makes sense to other people. When we do quality improvement, it's generally internal. We do it within our organization. But for quality research, we need to extend that to the world. And so we're trying to ultimately, with good research, predict the future based on what we see today. So we're in quality improvement, we're making sort of steps, and we're trying to get a little bit better and better and better. What we're trying to do with research is understand it so well that we can predict the future. So for instance, if we do a particular new way of splinting an arm, and if we do that the same way every time, we should get the same outcomes every time. And so we're able to predict the future if we have a good research process. So the big difference then between quality improvement and research would be able to predict the future in a way that we can make sense out of it and use it going forward. And so we start with defining the topic. We have to understand the topic in a very small way, because it's very difficult to make research grand, large. We're going to gather background information. We have to create a research question. We have to develop that through the idea of measurement, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Chris is going to talk, has some nice tools. We're going to, with that good measurement, create data or find data. That's going to be the information that we're going to analyze to make sense out of and ultimately share in a writing process. So that is what I'm considering the research process, which hopefully will be a common element for us. From a perspective of starting research, I wanted to leave us with this sort of a metaphor of thinking about doing something. And so we have these.
Zdravo, vaka jaz ti pišem v poraka, da.
So we have this idea of an intervention. So if we can think about having a seed in our hand, and what would we do with that seed? You know, we'd plant it. And so, you know, we could look at that, and what we'd want to know is what could we expect? What would we want from that seed? And in true experimental fashion in research, which is sort of the highest level of research, we would have a second seed or a plant, okay? And we'd want to be able to compare them. And so this is sort of the process of which, you know, we might start our research. Do we have something? Do we have a seed that we can plant, that we can change, that we could do something with so that we could see it afterwards? And so when you plant it, now this is the fun part of research, right? This is where we have something that's growing. And now we have a chance to describe it. And we could describe it in lots of different terms. It could be in terms of the color. It could be in terms of the size. It could be in the number of flowers that come out of this. Ultimately, we need to be able to share this with other people. And so if they plant this seed, they should be able to describe it in the same ways with the same measures. And that's going to be really helpful from a research perspective in being able to share. Understanding what previous research did and how they measured it will help test accuracy and reliability, and to make sure that what we're offering in terms of our description of flowers, or in our case, first aid, is valid for other people to be able to use. And so we want to pay attention, and we want to make good, reliable observations in research. So we need to be careful, though, that when we're comparing things, that we distinguish them, and that we're not trying to say everything is the same. And so in first aid, we might have different kinds of seeds that are producing very different things. And so we want to, again, be able to share our observations and to be able to predict the future going forward based on good measurements, either what we found before or something that we can develop ourselves. All right, so again, that sort of all starts with knowing what seeds we have, knowing that, you know, we have something that might be unique within our national societies, or within our programs, or within our particular course that we're working on. And so we need to be careful not to ask ourselves, did we just make change? And so it is already established in lots of the literature that education, if we educate somebody, they change. So when we're talking about expanding the research of first aid, we are not asking the question, if I teach somebody first aid, do they change? That's already been answered. Our job now, where research is, if you look at the guidelines, is how do we make it better, right? How do particular learning outcomes change? Do they change between the interventions? Do they change based on the population that we're teaching? Does it change over time? And et cetera, et cetera. And so we can gain more understanding as we dig deeper and looking at what we're trying to do from a mission perspective. what we're doing from a science perspective, what we're trying to do from a social perspective. Those are all great ways that we can start to see first aid education change the world. And we need to always understand the why of what we're doing. So why is this important? Is it important to my boss? Is it important to my organization? Is it important to the people who are taking the class? Is it important to science? And so bringing these together with your research question is going to give you lots of great opportunities. And those opportunities come from our chain of survival behaviors, which again is a common language that we've been developing through the guidelines for the last 10 years. And so the chain of survival behaviors are specific domains of first aid education. We teach prevention and preparedness differently than we teach about self-recovery. We teach about early recognition differently than we might teach about first aid itself. And so each of these is an opportunity in context, an opportunity in modality of how you teach it and through what tools, how we prepare and have our educators work, and it may be different in different populations. And so I hope that sets a little bit of a framework for what we're thinking about in terms of research. And so now I would like to introduce Tia. And Tia is an individual who works within her own national society who had a question and worked as a team to develop a process which she's going to talk about in the next few slides. So Tia, I'm passing it off to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me greet all of you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have opportunity to share the process we had in the Georgia Red Cross Society. By the way, I'm a first aid coordinator and first aid master trainer at the Georgia Red Cross Society, and I was the person who was directly involved and facilitating implementation of the process at the country national society level. So the process was started like this, that in 2018 presentation about opportunity to be involved in the evaluation project was done during the first aid annual meeting. We, Georgia Red Cross representatives, after this introduction process, realized that the process would be very productive and helpful for our trainers and for improvement our work in future. And we agreed, and we expressed willingness to be part of this process. So in the planning process, we had the main questions which appeared. So what was the current status of confidence and willingness of our participants to emergency situation after the first aid course conducted in the Georgia Red Cross Society. And another question was, what was the difference between our regions and trainers in developing confidence and willingness to act in an emergency situation after first aid course of the Georgia Red Cross Society. To answer to these questions, the evaluation project finally had two aims that was already shown in the previous slide, and it was to increase Georgia Red Cross Society's understanding of the quality of first aid education in Georgia, and to test the operational requirements of evaluation. And now, what were the tools and what kind of process took place? For Georgia Red Cross, it was also a challenge to select what to evaluate exactly, but again, based on our questions, we decided that we are evaluating willingness and confidence. So the tools were the evaluation forms, questionnaires, and page headers that were translated, of course, and adapted into Georgian language with technical and huge support of GFARC and British Red Cross, and namely Chris, and thanks to her for this. And there were used evaluation forms, which were completed by training participants, and the badge headers that were completed by the trainers after each training. So the badge header looked like this and was containing information about the indicating project site, and each branch had an ID number. We decided how to do it. Course date, learner audience type, because there were different groups of audience, duration of course, and trainer ID. Next slide, please. And the evaluation form included several questions. It was, of course, filled in before and after the training, and the questions were: how confident do you feel that you can use skills in a real time? And of course, there were points. How willing are you to help someone in a real emergency? How would you rate the training delivery to for each of the following? And there were different points, like how clearly the presentation was made, balance between practice and theory, providing constructive feedback, and how likely the participant was to recommend Georgia Red Cross Society as a first aid trainer provider. And it was, by the way, one of the very interesting points during assessment, because it revealed also the branches which it seems we are the best promoters of our work. Next slide, please. Now I will try to be very brief because I have only 8 minutes, and I will show you the outcomes according to different points. So it was outcome effect of branches. You see here average of confidence, willingness, and the combined result was 54, which I was that time explained that it was not bad result. Then what was also evaluated, and one of the results, it was next slide please. The outcome effect for audience, according to audience, because as I mentioned, there were different groups of audience. These were people, participants of commercial fee-based trainings, guides, which we are working with actively, people living hard to reach groups, school children, students, and other, some maybe mixed groups. And we, as you see, this evaluation showed the average confidence effect, outcome effect, and the combined result. And you see the difference between the target groups. And of course, this process is based on different aspects. And it seems that guides were more motivated, interested, and probably willing to really succeed. So you see the results here. Next slide, please. What about the Net Promoter Score? This definition was quite new for me that time, and then found out that it is quite interesting to know which branches and who are the people who really promote our work the best, because it was especially interesting for us, because we are not the national society who has the luxury to promote its activities very much in general public. So only our work promotes us, and it seems with our trainers. So it was very interesting. And on the next slide, there is also definition. And on the next slide, we can see how really branches are promoting our work. The numbers below, it is numbers of branches, because we had not names of branches, but numbers. It was also, we are not, we did not have aim to, it was not the main aim of the evaluation, but it was very interesting for us. On the next slide, sorry, I have, if we can go back. Yes, we have here the calculation of education effectiveness. And as you see, the potential for change was 90%. The participants' change was 60% of the scale, and the education effectiveness was finally 75%. Based on all this data, and there was a really brilliant report prepared by our partners, by the team, and there were even much more findings and big analysis and opportunities to even evaluate and make analysis of different points if the National Society was interested. So we are really very happy to have all this information about our work, about ourselves. And finally, very briefly, what was the key analysis findings that we, after our discussions of the results with our branches, our trainers, so each trainer needed to be more oriented on importance of conducting first aid than underlying risk of not proper first aid. The questionnaires and the answers of our participants showed that if the message is not clear enough, not short and positive, people start thinking or negative effect of their actions, then the importance of the prompt and immediate response. In case we are not clear enough, participants even very confident and willing before the training. Sometimes maybe after the training, less they are confident as they start thinking about potential threats and risks to make mistakes. And the trainings can even prevent a person from providing initial first aid, when our idea is to somehow make people confident and push them to act immediately, not to wait for others. So it was for us the reason to again discuss how to improve ourselves, our work, and how to really succeed further. And of course, we made some kind of plan of action recommendations for ourselves. And of course, it was disseminated among our volunteers, trainers. And now one is planned, but now I see that it is our everyday reality. Then we, our trainers, will try to to somehow raise people's confidence through their work, and they are less oriented on just conducting training, but the idea is more and more to be sure that people go out from our classes and they really act in case they need. So it was very good experience for us, and again we are very thankful for this opportunity to have research, to have these possibilities. And in case of any interest, of course, in Georgia Red Cross Society, we are open to answer more questions, to talk about more details, maybe technical. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention, and thanks.
Thank you, Tia. So as Tia was sharing that story of her work and the work of the society, it really made sense to see this as almost a baseline of research. And so now they have even more information to work from, either for quality improvement or for future research as they decide on different kinds of interventions. So in terms of like the conversations about how do you make them positive and clear and short, they can try different messages in different courses and now compare them and share those differences to see if how they might have changed people's willingness or confidence to act. So great example. Thank you very much for doing that. And Chris, are we sharing back to Basante for how we're getting into group discussion?
No, it's me now.
Yeah, okay.
I'll introduce it. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'm just going to introduce the next activity. I'll just speak for a couple of minutes. So yes, thanks, Tia, so much for that presentation. I think that's a really neat idea of how a national society can start to experiment in measuring outcomes, either for evaluation or for research. So thank you so much. So we are going to break into groups. Before we do, I just want to talk about the evidence-based process a little bit. I think you'll all be familiar with this little diagram that we have here. So this is our evidence-based triangle, and this is how we develop our guidelines that underpin all of our first aid activity. So it's composed of the best available scientific evidence. It's composed of the expertise from experts in the field and from the preferences of our target groups. And all those three elements combined develop evidence-based practice and is the underpinning of our guidelines. And where we're focused today in this session is around that first box there, that best available scientific evidence. Next slide, thanks, Jeffrey. And so if we've got the to get this scientific evidence, there is a little process that happens. What happens is that the Centre for Evidence-Based Practice in Belgian Red Cross and the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, they both do these big systematic reviews. So they ask a question and they look for all the relevant papers that they can find, all the studies that they can find on that question for their systematic review. And all those little studies that you can see in the top there, those studies all get filtered down and they go through a little review process. And they're all read and they're reviewed, and out comes an evidence summary. So CBAP and ILCOR create these evidence summaries. Next button, please. And they create these evidence summaries. But what we're really lacking is the studies. So what we need is more research. And this is what this webinar is really about today, is to really encourage you all to get involved in this, in generating more research and more evaluations.
So use that link.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. So that we can get more, more research and more evaluation. And next button, please. And that will give us more, evidence-based guidelines. So what is a study? What are we looking for here? Well, we're asking for more for research projects to take place. And what that starts with is there'll be a study question, which we'll come on to in our discussion in a moment. Then there's where you select a study type. You then do your research project by collecting and analyzing the data, which is what you saw Tia presenting on just now, all that data that they analyzed. You interpret the results, which is what you find, and then you report on the findings. So you might publish that. Next button. So they must be ethical, and where we're focusing today is this study question. So we're going to be talking in our groups about study questions. Next slide, please. And the idea is that in 2025, when we next do our big gathering of evidence, when CBAP and ILCOR are doing their systematic reviews and looking for scientific evidence, that they will be able to find many more studies, because you've done your research projects. And just one button, thanks. Yep. And the idea is that you two, like our colleagues in Canada, this is Adam Giesecke and Shelley Longmore, who published a paper on education for choking. And this is now an underpinning for the scientific foundation for choking. And this is what we're looking for to inspire, I hope. And so the idea is we're going to break off into groups now, and we're going to talk about your research questions. What are you passionate about? What do you want to know more about? So we'll talk about your research questions and try and decide what might be a feasible question that you might be able to take forward, either yourself or in partnership with a university, for example. Over to you, Basant, sorry.
Okay, so everyone, you're gonna, in a few minutes, a little box will appear on your screen where you just have to click on it, and you will be directed in a breakout room where we will discuss the pre-work that we have sent for you. We have asked you to think of a research question and topic, and then we will discuss it together. So all you have to do is just click on the box that would just appear right away. Did you all receive the invitation? No? I don't know if does anyone have a problem with the invitation? Everyone received the invitation? Is it okay? Everyone, is anyone who has a problem regarding the invitation for the breakout room?
pressed the wrong button. I left the broom accidentally.
Oh,
I think we're gradually coming back.
yeah.
Nearly here. I think most of us are here now.
Yep.
Cool. Wow. Well, how did your conversation go, Jeffrey?
Oh, we just sat and looked at each other. No talking. It went really well. Our group really focused fairly quickly on very complimentary questions around the effectiveness of not teaching face-to-face because of the evidence and need of COVID. And so the conversation was really about how could you break that apart, because it's such a big question. And so instead of trying to answer the big question, does online teaching work? The question is, does it work maybe for different populations? Does it work for different cultures? Does it work with the different kinds of technology? Does it support our mission in terms of being able to ethically serve everybody while making sure we can afford to do it? So there's a conversation about ethics and money, and those are all very important elements of first aid education. I think when we were maybe talking earlier, we were all thinking maybe, can I teach something better? Well, teaching is part of a larger system, and we can research those bigger pieces too, of how do you afford it? How do you train your trainers? How do you use evidence-based guidelines? Those are all really important parts of understanding first aid education, which I think would help us all around the world if we shared some of that.
Cool. In the group I was in, we had some really amazing questions to some such, really fundamental ideas around trying to understand perhaps the impact of diverse people and using diversity within our videos and our imagery, and how that diversity might impact positively, or lack of diversity negatively on some groups, or around the effectiveness of storytelling in first aid, and there also one around trying to understand actually what is the actual helping behavior that people do in real life after they've learned first aid. So there's some really fantastic ideas coming up. Sorry. That's my dog. I don't know if you can hear her. She's just saying hello. But Tia or Besant, would you like to say anything?
Sorry.
Yes, our group was also very active, and especially two group members from Estonian Red Cross, Manfred and Dr. is from Pakistan, and there were quite important issues mentioned. For example, Estonian Red Cross plans to make some kind of evaluation, and the main question is, how willing are people to act in case of road accidents? And there were also some questions about use of different guidelines and about effectiveness. And Dr. Pascal was also very supportive. We had this luxury to have him in the group. Also, there was mentioned by Dr. Rees that in Pakistan there are lots of questions and the National Society would be happy to have this process of evaluation and for answering these various questions. But of course, as many national societies, they don't have enough resources. Though they use a pre-test, post-test experience and so on. And also the main issue that was raised was how to measure the confidence. And we again returned to Georgia Red Cross example that it could be measured in terms of education. But the challenge and the issue was, I think it is not, of course, only for Pakistan, how to measure how really people act in case of emergency situations. One issue is what we teach, but how can we be sure that they act correctly in times of emergency situations, and also some lack of resources in community level, in places where there is lack of healthcare facilities, and or the lay people have to provide first aid, and sometimes they don't have enough resources, and maybe to use, for example, not proper equipment, maybe it can raise risk of infections instead of providing effective first aid. So these were the main challenges raised in our group and the ideas. And again, in the group, there was kind of agreement. Everybody agreed that even with the small resources, national societies still can make some, at least small processes, small evaluation, and even share to each other. And maybe it will be interesting and important, not only for one national society, but for others. I think it was all. If I missed something, COVID so late.
Chris, was there one more group?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was the group where I was in it, and Joe also was leading the group. So
Oh, sorry, Joanna. Yeah, thank you.
We had an awesome discussion, and I want to spend a whole day with my group because I feel like we just started to chew into the tip of the iceberg. But probably the most common thing that came up within our group was the idea of refresh and retraining learners, and trying to ensure that there's some sustainability of their experience, and the next time you see them, how do you build off of that? And so we didn't get too far into our questions because we were kind of more sharing of our ideas, but I did share a link to the guidelines and the refresh and retrain paper that's there. So I'll send that out to the group in case others are interested, but that seems to be something that's on our minds. How do we look at a lower dose, higher frequency approach to learning as a way to try to maintain that community resiliency and individual resiliency?
Cool. Thank you, Joe. So maybe just to wrap this up real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Chris again, we have these themes. We need to remember that there's a practical part of this. And part of that practical part is looking at the previous research. And so as Joe passed out the guidelines link, there's also really great things about different journals and being able to see the tools that they use. And that's going to help you shorten and focus your research question to make sure it's feasible to measure your accurately what you want to be able to get that data, and then even think about that being able to help you fund some of your activities. So, so I think moving on, we're talking about a toolkit. Still missing.
Thanks,
There you go.
Jeffrey. Yeah. There I go. I'm not muted anymore. Hello. I love that idea of starting with previous research. I think that's a fantastic idea. And this is another tool as well that you could also start with. So what I'm going to talk about here is the outcomes toolkit. So hopefully you all might have had an opportunity to have a read through some or all of the outcomes toolkit in advance of this session today. And I'm not going to go into any detail about it. This is more just sort of raise your awareness that it exists really. And yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. So just to say, the outcome, when we're talking about outcome measurement, so the outcome is a change. We're basically trying to measure a change, and that change is caused by an intervention. There are different types of outcomes. So there are learning outcomes, patient outcomes, or outcomes in society. There are others as well. This is just a sample, but they are all. When there is an intervention, you can measure a change. So if you teach someone, for example, how to recognize a stroke, you teach them the signs of a stroke, then their outcome will be a change in knowledge. They might know how to recognize a stroke, or at least have an increased knowledge of that. And then there's some of these are easier to measure than others, I think, is my point of this slide. And perhaps the most easy to measure are the learning outcomes, because we are working in an education environment. I think most of us in our day-to-day work, we can most easily set up to start to evaluate learning outcomes, and whether that's through a research project or an evaluation project. I think the learning outcomes is a real opportunity. Patient outcomes or helping behaviors and all those sorts of things also are amazingly important. And if we can get research projects like those coming through, then that would be amazing too. But the outcomes toolkit focuses on learning outcomes just because they're that much easier perhaps for us to start with initially. Next slide, thanks. So learning outcomes, this is just a sample, but things like knowledge, as I mentioned. There's also skills or confidence to act, or likelihood to act. You can measure all of these by using simple little tools. Next slide, thanks. And as I mentioned, whether it's research or evaluation, the idea is that you do something, that there is an intervention, and you measure the outcome, the change, the resulting change. So if we talk in education terms, as I say, if we teach someone something, that's the intervention, and then the change is the thing that happens to the person as a result of that education. So they change. So I think Elif was telling us in our group just now about teaching people who have visual and hearing impairments, and that they're going to actually be looking at measuring the knowledge, the change in knowledge from the intervention, the program, the special program that they're designing for them. So I think that'll be an amazing project, for example, to keep our eye on. Next slide. Oh, sorry. And yeah, I was going to say, if research is feeling like an intimidating thing or quite a big thing, then evaluation can just be an easier place to start, because you can do it on quite a small scale. You can start just by evaluating, perhaps one learner audience group, or just a specific course. So you can start small and perhaps grow your knowledge and grow your confidence to do bigger and better evaluation and then research projects. Next slide. Oop, back one. So the outcomes toolkit is there for you to help you with this process. It has a whole bunch of approaches around that first aid teams can use to start to evaluate the learning outcomes, and just one button. Thanks, Jeffrey. So there's like little tools like this one. Yep, so there's little tools you will have seen that use these Likert scales, so you can have different types of scales. And the idea is, if you're measuring learning outcomes, you'll measure before and after the learning experience, that intervention. You'll measure the learner before and after, and see what the changes that you created. So the toolkit's got a whole range of those, and then it's also got some information around how you can then use this type of data to start to improve the quality of our education. So there's a whole range of different ways that you might use it. So you can use it to, I think one of the main ones Tina talked about earlier in Georgia Red Cross is that they're using this data to try and improve their performance of their trainers by giving them more training and that sort of thing. So that's one aspect. You can look at how effective products are and try and improve products, so you can adjust your product to make them better. You can also, when you start collecting data from evaluation or research, then you've got data that you can then give to people like funders who might be more willing to give you some funding for a project because you can prove that it's effective, or other decision makers. And the aspect that I'm really excited about is this, where we start to get into the cross-border collaborative research, and this research that starts to inform how effective our modalities are, and the first aid kind of performance of people is, though that's where we'll really start to inform our evidence base, and it will really start to drive forward our education. So I guess that outcomes toolkit is there. It is a starting point for of getting down on paper some information about outcomes toolkit. It's not the end of the line for that toolkit, and I hope that it will develop as we as a movement start to learn more about how we can evaluate outcomes, and that we can grow that body of evidence. So yes, but that toolkit is there as a starting point. I hope it's useful for you, and we'll set you on a path to start measuring outcomes. And I'll pass over at this point to Jeffrey, who's going to talk a little bit about some other support that might be available to you if you are going down this path.
We hope we're walking with you down this path together, because the research is very exciting. And once you're sort of part of this community, there are so many people to help you, to ask you good questions. And I think that's, again, where this toolkit is really helpful for people, in order to see that you don't have to do this alone, that there's been research before. We're using techniques that other people have used, and maybe in different fields. And when I started out this webinar, I was saying that each of you has a superpower, and that may be something that has nothing to do with first aid, but it might be in terms of psychology or sociology or working with organizations. Each of those fields has a way of inquiry in order to ask questions that you can use theory to understand why things change or don't change. And so I would invite you to, again, understand your own superpower so that you can participate and contribute the way you want to be able to. And so I think I only have about 2 more hours of talking. So, all right, thank you for laughing, Chris. So I want to just mention a couple of things about our research community that might be available to you, or I'd like to invite you to be part of. And that is the International Journal of First Aid Education. And that journal is something that came about because of the movement, but is not attached to the Red Cross. It's independent. Chris is one of our senior editors. Many of you know Emily Oliver, who's a senior editor. And then we have several of our board members, including Joanna, on this call. And we're part of a community that wants to see the field grow. And so if you want to go to the journal itself, it is free for you to read and for you to share with everybody else. And so I'm going to just talk about a couple of the benefits, and then I'll actually show you the journal itself. But the benefits of participating with the field of first aid education is that you stay informed. So people may have already answered part of your question that you have already. People may have challenged and brought up a new question that you might have an answer to possibly. And so you get to stay informed about what is happening. You also get to see peer-reviewed research, which means that just because I did a research project doesn't mean it's perfect. It's when we have this community of peer reviewers who contribute to that thought process and to the writing that allows us to have more confidence in the research that's being published. And so there's a peer review process which you could participate in, so that you can learn and see maybe underneath the page to see how it's developed. Within the journal, we're also trying to provide some news and some updates. Frederick from Sweden, the whole Scandinavian area has been hosting first aid conferences for the last few years. The Canadian Red Cross has hosted some international events, the Trainer of Trainer programs, lots of updates there. And you also get to see activities that people are invested in, because not only does the journal produce research, but we also share views from the field and views of opinion pieces. And so that, again, we can challenge each other in order to be able to do a good job with developing the field. So you can read, you can peer review. Hopefully that'll help you feel confident about being an author. And then ultimately, if you'd like to consider maybe an editorial board position in the journal, we'd be happy to entertain that idea. So feel free to contact me at editor@firstaid-revolution.org. So if you'd like to find more information about the journal itself. I'm going to stop sharing this and go to another piece. I'm assuming everybody can now see the first aid journal. Awesome. So a couple of big things, whether you're sharing your information with this particular journal, or you're choosing another journal, maybe in your own country or in your own region of the world. But all journals have an aims and a perspective of what and why they do, why the journal's there. Our particular journal is based on the chain of survival behaviors. And we have different features that have empirical research, meaning very descriptive from a research question. Then we just have descriptive manuscripts. What's happening out there? How to develop theory, and then short papers, including commentaries and pieces from different conferences. The chain of survival behaviors, again, is sort of explained a little bit in terms of why it's important that we have people assess and develop first aid in each of those domains. And you can concentrate on one domain. The bigger questions tend to be on where those rings overlap. And so how do we get people from early intervention to first aid, or early recognition to first aid? Those are some of our bigger questions. One of the bigger things for you as potential authors is that there's a lot of guidance usually on journal websites. And so we talk about why you might be doing something, how you might do something ethically, and every intervention needs to have an ethical evaluation. There are pre-submission pieces around quality elements, like using a particular format or a particular language style. And then there are descriptions of the different types that you could submit, and some of the important things like how many words you can have. And so those are usually described. We use, in this particular journal, a series of checklists based on the style of inquiry that you did. So there is a link up here to the Equator Network. And the Equator Network is a great tool, a great resource that allows you to look for different checklists. And the checklists are things that you should have in your publication. What's really important is that you might look at that ahead of time, because that's what you're going to have to do in your research so that you're ready for your publication. So looking at where you want to publish might give you some clues on how to do that. And so that's a quick overview of the journal, maybe some opportunities for people to think about resources, but understand that there's a whole community, peer reviewers or volunteers, just like a lot of the people in your that are working with you, that we invite them. We have collaborators between authors and editors to help you get ready for your manuscript and things like that. So understand that there's a community to support you. Again, I'd like to think we use all the principles of the IFRC. And so it's a really a fun way to get together and answer good questions. So I think that brings us to about 5 minutes to the end. And so I'll pass that back to Basante.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for this resource that is very valuable for research. And also, I would like to add that you can find on our website on the GFARC platform. I will share my screen right away. You can find a page dedicated to resources, and we have a specific page for research and survey where you will have a lot of resources from different national societies and for different organizations where you can check it and see if it's gonna be for any benefits of you. And beside that, I would like to ask if anyone has any kind of question that I would like to ask to Jeffrey, Thea, and Chris. Also, I will put right away the link for the research page for our platform, and we'll be waiting for your question. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, write it in the chat, or just go ahead and say it. The first one is always the hardest part.
Maybe we put everybody to sleep.
One thing I was going to suggest, if I may, is just if you're looking to get started in this, is perhaps talking to a university locally that you might have. And universities often have big areas of research, and they might be looking for ideas for research. So approaching universities could be a good way to go.
And they often need data. So maybe you can get one of their graduate students to do some of this work.
So I'll just ask one question, which is where you are making this chart of measuring outcome. And I've seen there are like, asking likelihood or confidence to act. And there are 5, I guess. Sometimes there is 10 and sometimes there is 5, right? So what I've seen usually the participant when I'm asking, they're very safely, they either mark 3 or they mark 5. So you don't know, either they're on this side or they're on the other side. So it's very confusing either. So I think, I don't know if they want to, don't want to answer, they are not confident enough to answer. So they keep the trainer in the middle. So we don't know where they are. They're just either 3 or 5. If they are 10, they'll say 5. If they are 6, they'll say they're at 3.
So one of the things that I would challenge people to think about is how to maybe break confidence down or willingness to more fundamental pieces. And the global question is helpful for maybe a large survey, like you're trying to measure everybody because it's easy. But there are better tools to maybe do with a smaller group to allow you to understand they may be confident to help their family member, but they're not confident to help a stranger.
That's right.
Right. So, and they may have confidence in being able to do a skill, but not remember the 5 steps of something. And so there are better tools to help you answer that, truly the question.
Yeah.
Where I think the Likert, the just 1 through 5 or 7 is it has some value on the being able to ask a lot of people the same question very quickly, but you may want to do more in-depth research.
Yeah,
with
that's
like the intention to aid tool, which I'd happy to share with you.
Yeah.
The intention to aid tool looks at knowledge, skills, and attitudes based on the theory of planned behavior, but it's only been validated in Western cultures. So we're not sure if it's valid in maybe an Islamic culture or a Buddhist culture, or, you know, different things. So there's some really interesting research questions about why and how people feel confident.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and I would really like to thank Christine, Jeffrey, and Thea for being here and for sharing their knowledge and all this information with us. It was a great pleasure having all of you here, and I will leave it to Pascal now. Pascal, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was mute. Yes, just a word for everybody. Don't be too modest. You are able to do research, and even I said that in a group. But you can begin with a small research, and after you really increase your research step by step. So the most important is to begin, to try to evaluate. Remember how many people you are teaching per year. It's a lot, 20 million for the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. And it will be a pity if in 10 years, we will be not able to say, okay, in these 20 million people, a certain amount has a good retention because, or they have not a good retention because also. That's we have to measure all of that to be better and better, and sure you are able to do that in a near future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Allah Hafiz.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, Basant?
Okay, goodbye.
Okay. All right. I'll see you on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for today.
Okay. No worries.
Goodbye.
Lovely to see you, Lulu. Okay. I'll see you Friday then.
Sorry, Christine. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. Congrats, girls.
Mhm.